I floored the gas pedal and my truck lurched forward, engine whining as I pushed it harder than I should. 5:58. 2 minutes left. The speedometer hit 40 on Main Street, way too fast for downtown Millbrook, but I didn't care. Mom's voice kept playing in my head, that edge of panic when she'd called 10 minutes ago. Car trouble on Cedar Street. She needed help. Now. I dropped everything at the shop, grabbed my toolbox, and ran. Bill just nodded when I said it was Mom. He knew the rules, same as everyone else in this town. You don't get caught outside after 6. Cedar Street came up fast, and I took the corner hard, tires squealing. There, Mom's blue Honda sitting crooked against the curb, hood up, hazards blinking. I slammed the brakes and jumped out, toolbox in hand. Mom? No answer. The street was empty except for her car. I jogged over to the Honda, looking around. Mom? Where are you? The engine bay was cold, hadn't been running for a while. I checked the driver's seat, the sidewalk, the front steps of the houses nearby. Nothing. My watch read 5:59. Mom! I called louder, checking behind the car, under it, anywhere she might be. The toolbox felt heavy in my grip. Where the hell was she? 6 o'clock hit and the streetlights flickered on. That's when I heard her voice. Marcus, help me! It came from the direction of the woods, maybe 50 yards down the street where the tree line started. Faint but clear. Definitely Mom. I started running toward the sound, but something in my gut twisted. The voice was wrong somehow. Too distant. Too perfect. Marcus, please. I stopped at the edge of the pavement. The forest stretched out in front of me, dark between the trees even with the streetlights behind me. I'd been 12 the last time I heard Mom's voice calling from these woods. Uncle Robert had grabbed my arm before I could take a step. That's not your mother, he'd said. The forest remembers voices, steals them, uses them. But this was different. This was real. Had to be. Mom, keep calling, I'm coming. I'm hurt, Marcus. Please hurry. The desperation in her voice cut through every warning I'd ever been given, every rule Uncle Robert had drilled into me, every careful habit that had kept me alive for 28 years. I stepped off the pavement and onto the forest floor. Where are you? This way. Follow my voice. I pushed through the first line of trees, branches catching at my jacket. The toolbox banged against my leg as I stumbled over roots and rocks. Behind me, the street lights faded fast. Keep talking, Mom. I'm here, just a little further. Her voice moved deeper into the woods, always just ahead, always out of sight. I followed, crashing through underbrush, calling back to her. The sound of my own voice echoed weird in the trees, like the forest was swallowing it up and spitting it back wrong. Mom! This way, honey. Almost there. I kept walking, kept following, kept breaking every rule I'd lived by since I was old enough to understand what lived in these woods. The toolbox caught on a low branch and nearly yanked my arm out of its socket. I jerked it free and kept going, pushing through a wall of pine needles that scraped across my face like fingernails. Marcus, I'm hurt. Always ahead, always just out of reach. My boot slipped on wet leaves and I went down hard, catching myself on a fallen log. The bark bit into my palms, but I hauled myself up and kept moving. Had to keep moving. This way, honey. Keep following my voice. The words echoed wrong in the darkness, bouncing off trees that pressed closer together the deeper I went. My breathing came in sharp bursts, visible in the cold air. How long had I been walking? Felt like forever. Felt like minutes. A branch whipped across my cheek and I tasted blood. Mom, where are you? So close now, just a little further. I stumbled over a root system that spread across the forest floor like a spider web. The toolbox banged against my knee and I cursed under my breath. My jacket was torn in 3 places, and something warm trickled down my forehead. The trees opened up ahead. I pushed through one last curtain of branches and stopped dead. A clearing stretched out in front of me, maybe 30 feet across. Moonlight filtered down through the canopy, lighting up the ground like a stage, and scattered across that ground, Jesus Christ. Wallets, dozens of them, car keys glinting in the pale light, a woman's purse with the strap torn off, jewelry spread across the dirt like someone had dumped out a jewelry box, clothes everywhere, shirts, jackets, shoes without their partners. I took a step forward and my boot crunched on something. Looked down. Reading glasses, the frames bent and twisted. "Marcus?" The voice came from directly behind me now. I spun around but saw nothing except trees and shadows. My hands shook as I gripped the toolbox handle tighter. Marcus. There. To my left. But when I turned, just more darkness. I walked deeper into the clearing, stepping carefully around the scattered belongings. A child's backpack with cartoon characters on it. A man's wedding ring half buried in the dirt. A cell phone with a cracked screen. And then I saw it. Brown leather jacket, spread out neat, as if someone had laid it down for a picnic. The same jacket Derek wore every day junior year. The same jacket he was wearing when I dropped the toolbox. The metal clanged against something hard and I looked down. A driver's license stared up at me from the dirt. Patricia Henley, 63 years old, the woman who went missing last spring while walking her dog. Marcus. The voice was different now, deeper, like someone had slowed down a recording and played it back wrong. Marcus. Not my mother's voice anymore. Couldn't be. The sound came from everywhere at once, from the trees, from the ground, from the air itself. Something crashed through the underbrush behind me. I spun around and saw branches exploding outward like something massive was bulldozing through them. The sound of splintering wood echoed across the clearing. Heavy breathing, wet and labored, getting closer. Another crash. Closer. I grabbed the toolbox and ran. Didn't matter which direction, just away from that sound, away from whatever was making its way toward me through the trees. I hit the tree line at full speed and branches tore at my clothes, my face, my hands. Behind me, the breathing got louder, closer. I could hear it now, really hear it. Not human breathing. Too deep, too wet. Like something was drowning and trying to breathe at the same time. A tree branch caught my jacket and spun me around. I ripped free and kept running, the toolbox swinging wild in my grip. Roots tried to trip me, and I jumped over them, stumbled, caught myself, kept going. The thing behind me crashed through a fallen tree. I heard the wood splinter and break apart, getting closer. My lungs burned and my legs felt like rubber, but I didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. The wet breathing filled the air behind me, so close I could almost feel it on my neck. A root caught my foot and I went down hard, rolling across the forest floor. The toolbox flew out of my hands and crashed into a tree trunk. I scrambled to my feet and left it there. Lighter now, I ran faster. The breathing was right behind me, right there. And then the trees opened up and I burst out onto pavement, my boots hitting asphalt so hard I nearly fell again. Streetlights blazed overhead and I gasped, sucking in air that tasted like freedom. Riverside Road. I was on Riverside Road. I bent over, hands on my knees, blood dripping from cuts on my face and hands. My shirt was torn and something warm ran down my arm where a branch had gotten me good. The forest behind me went quiet. I stood there on Riverside Road for maybe 5 minutes, letting my breathing settle and wiping blood off my face with my torn sleeve. The cuts stung, but they weren't deep. Nothing I couldn't handle, but I had to get back to Cedar Street. Had to find out what happened to my mother. The drive back felt longer than it should have. My hands shook on the steering wheel and I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something following me out of those woods, but the road stayed empty behind me. When I turned onto Cedar Street, both cars were still there. My truck where I'd left it, and my mother's Honda still crooked against the curb with the hood up. but something was different. I parked and walked over to the Honda, moving slow and careful. The driver's side door was open now. It hadn't been open before. I was sure of it. My mother's purse sat on the driver's seat. I stopped walking. That purse hadn't been there when I'd searched the car. I'd looked everywhere. The seat had been empty. I approached the Honda like it might bite me. The purse was brown leather, worn at the corners. Definitely hers. I'd seen it 1,000 times hanging from her shoulder or sitting on the kitchen counter. A piece of paper stuck out from under the purse. White notebook paper, folded once. I pulled it out and unfolded it under the streetlight. Handwriting in blue ink, neat and careful. My mother's handwriting. Gone to help Mrs. Henderson on Northbrook Avenue. Back soon. I read it 3 times. The words didn't change. Mrs. Henderson. I knew her. Lived alone. Had to be pushing 80. My mother had helped her before when she'd fallen or needed groceries. The kind of thing my mother would drop everything for. But Northbrook Avenue was on the north side of town. My mother would never go to the north side. Not after dark. Not ever, really, but especially not after dark. She'd drilled that into me since I was old enough to walk. Stay away from the north side. Stay away from the fog that rolled in there some nights, thick and wrong and full of things that shouldn't be. I looked at the note again. The handwriting was perfect. Too perfect. Every letter exactly like my mother would write it, but without the little imperfections that came with writing fast or being worried. Someone had taken time with this note. Someone who knew how my mother wrote. I folded the paper and shoved it in my pocket. Got back in my truck and sat there for a minute, engine running, trying to think. Every instinct I had was screaming at me not to go to Northbrook Avenue. The same instincts that had kept me alive for 28 years in this town. The same ones I'd ignored when I followed that voice into the woods. But if there was even a chance my mother was really there, really helping Mrs. Henderson. I put the truck in drive. The north side wasn't far. 10 minutes through downtown, past the closed shops and empty parking lots. I'd driven through it before during the day, but never at night. Never when the fog was rolling in, and it was rolling in now. I could see it as I got closer, creeping between the houses like smoke. Thick white mist that didn't move right, didn't follow the wind. It just spread, slow and deliberate, covering everything. I turned onto Northbrook Avenue, and the fog was already knee-deep on the street. My headlights cut through it, but not far. Maybe 20 feet before everything disappeared into white. The fog started seeping into the truck. I checked the windows, closed tight. Checked the vents, closed those too. But it kept coming in anyway. Thin wisps curling around the dashboard and creeping across the floor. That wasn't possible, but there it was. I parked the truck and turned off the engine. The streetlights were dim smudges in the mist, barely visible. I couldn't see house numbers, couldn't see much of anything. I got out and the fog hit me like walking into a wall. Thick and cold and wrong, it pressed against my skin, got in my nose and mouth no matter how I tried to breathe shallow. "Mom," I called out. My voice sounded muffled, like the fog was eating it. "Mom, are you here?" Nothing answered. I started walking down the sidewalk, or where I thought the sidewalk was. Hard to tell with the fog covering everything. I called again, louder this time. "Elena Thompson, Mrs. Henderson, anyone." The fog got thicker with every step. Soon I couldn't see my own feet, couldn't see the houses I was walking past. The streetlights disappeared completely. My phone was in my pocket. I pulled it out to use the flashlight, but the screen was dead, completely black. The phone had been working fine 5 minutes ago. I kept walking, one hand out in front of me so I wouldn't walk into anything. The fog pressed against me from all sides now, thick as cotton. Every breath was work. Something moved to my right, a shape in the mist, tall and human-looking. I turned toward it. "Hello, Mom?" The shape beckoned to me, slow, deliberate wave of its arm. "Come here." I took a step toward it, and the shape dissolved, just melted back into the fog like it had never been there. Another shape appeared on my left. This one looked smaller, more like my mother's height. It waved too, then started walking away into the mist. I followed it, but after a few steps, it was gone. Vanished. More shapes now. Ahead of me, behind me, all around. All of them beckoning. All of them disappearing when I got close. The fog was so thick now I couldn't breathe right. It filled my lungs like liquid, heavy and cold. I coughed, and it came out as white vapor that mixed with the mist around me. The fog pressed against me harder. Not just thick now, but active, pushing at my chest, my face, my arms, like something alive trying to wrap around me. I couldn't tell how long I'd been stumbling through that mess when I saw her. A park bench, right there in the middle of the fog like someone had dropped it from the sky, and sitting on it, calm as you please, was my mother. She looked exactly right. Same brown hair pulled back, same hospital scrubs, same way of holding her shoulders, but there was no park on Northbrook Avenue. Never had been. "Mom?" She turned toward me and her face was perfect. Every line, every freckle exactly like it should be. But when she opened her mouth, what came out made my blood freeze. "Marcus, you should have stayed home." Derek's voice, Derek's exact inflection. That way he used to drag out the word home when he was being a smartass, coming out of my mother's mouth. I didn't think, just grabbed her hand and pulled. "Come on." Her hand felt real enough, warm, solid, familiar. But the fog pressed against us harder now, like it was angry. Every step felt like pushing through wet concrete. "Marcus, wait!" Still Derek's voice, still my mother's face. I held tighter and kept moving. The mist wrapped around us, trying to get between our hands. I could feel it pulling at her, trying to drag her back into the thick of it, like invisible fingers prying at our grip. "Don't let go," I said. My lungs were on fire. The fog wasn't just thick anymore, it was wrong. Too heavy, too cold, like breathing underwater. But I knew this street, grew up walking it. Even blind, I could find my way. Left foot, right foot, follow the sidewalk cracks, count the steps between streetlights. The fog fought us every inch, pressed against my chest, my face trying to fill my mouth when I gasped for air. My vision went gray around the edges. Then suddenly we were through. Clean air hit my lungs like a punch. I stumbled forward, dragging her with me, and we both went down hard on the sidewalk. Real sidewalk, under real streetlights. She was gasping next to me, hands pressed to her chest. When she looked up, her eyes were different. Clear, worried, normal. "Marcus?" Her own voice now, scared and confused. "How did I get here? The car broke down and then..." She shook her head. "Everything's blank." I helped her to her feet, keeping hold of her arm. She felt solid, real. But I'd thought that about the voice in the woods too. "Come on," I said, "we're going home." The walk back took maybe 10 minutes. I kept glancing at her every few steps, watching for any sign that this wasn't really her. The way she moved looked right, the way she breathed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something might still be wearing her face. She stumbled once on a crack in the sidewalk and I caught her elbow. "Thanks," she said, her voice. Definitely her voice. But I'd heard her voice calling from the woods too. When we reached the house, I unlocked the front door and let her go in first. Then I went around checking every window, every door. Kitchen window, back door, both bedroom windows. The little window in the bathroom that nobody ever thinks about. Everything locked tight. She was sitting on the couch when I came back to the living room, hands folded in her lap. She looked tired, confused. "I don't understand what happened," she said. "The car just died." and then everything's blank until I was sitting in all that fog. I sat down next to her, close enough to touch if I needed to. Close enough to be sure. You don't remember anything else? She shook her head. Nothing. It's like someone just erased a couple hours. I wanted to tell her. About the voice in the woods. About the clearing full of things that belonged to people who weren't coming home. About how something had been using her voice to call my name. But what was the point? She didn't remember. Maybe that was better. We sat there for maybe an hour. I kept watching her. The way she blinked. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear. All of it looked right. But I couldn't stop checking. At 9 o'clock, something started walking past the house. Heavy footsteps on the sidewalk, slow and deliberate. And then a voice calling out, "Marcus!" I went rigid. The voice was mine. My exact voice. Elena. Now it was hers. She started to get up, but I grabbed her wrist. "Don't move." "What is that?" "Stay quiet." The footsteps kept going, past the front of the house toward the corner. But they didn't keep going down the street. They turned, coming around the side of the house. The breathing started then, deep and wet, like air passing through something damaged, like lungs full of water trying to work anyway. Marcus, Elena, our voices again, perfect copies. The footsteps went all the way around the house, past the kitchen window, past the back door, past the bedroom windows, around to the front again. It made 3 full circles. Each time the breathing got louder. Each time it called our names in our own voices. Then it stopped, right outside the front door. "Marcus, Elena? I know you're in there." My voice. But I wasn't saying anything. She was gripping my arm now, her fingers digging in. "What is that thing?" "Quiet," I whispered. The breathing continued for what felt like forever. Deep, wet, wrong. Sometimes it would call our names. Sometimes it would just stand there, breathing. I knew what it was. I'd heard it before, when I was 18. Walking the streets after dark, looking for something. I'd hidden in an alley that night, pressed against a dumpster, while it called my name for 20 minutes. It had found me then. It had found us now. After almost an hour, the breathing stopped. The footsteps started again, moving away from the door, down the sidewalk, getting fainter. We sat there for another hour after that, neither of us moving. When I was finally sure it was gone, she turned to me. "What was that?" I looked at her. She really didn't remember anything about the fog, about the voice that wasn't hers, about any of it. "I don't know," I said. I spent the next 3 days at the library, didn't tell Elena where I was going, just said I had errands to run, things to take care of. She didn't ask questions, which should have been my first clue. Elena always asked questions. The Millbrook Public Library sits on Main Street, 3 blocks from the auto shop. Red brick building, probably built in the 1930s. I'd been there maybe twice in my life, both times in high school for research papers I didn't want to write. Mrs. Patterson worked the front desk, Bill's wife. She had the same kind eyes as her husband, same patient way of looking at you like she understood more than she let on. "I need to look at old newspapers," I told her. "Local stuff, going back as far as you have." She studied my face for a moment. The cuts from the branches were healing, but they were still visible. Purple bruises around my left eye where something had caught me in the woods. "How far back?" "Start with 20 years, maybe more." She led me to a back room with tall filing cabinets and a microfilm machine that looked older than I was. The chair squeaked when I sat down. She brought me boxes of film, rolls and rolls of the Millbrook Weekly going back to 1980. "You looking for anything specific?" "Missing persons," I said. She nodded like she'd been expecting that answer. I started with recent years and worked backward. The pattern showed up right away, clear as daylight once you knew what to look for. Patricia Henley, last spring. Went missing while walking her dog near the woods. Dog found 3 days later, wandering downtown. No sign of Patricia. James Morrison, 2 years before that. Disappeared after his car broke down on Cedar Street. Car found with the hood up, key still in the ignition. Margaret Chen, the year before Morrison. Last seen walking toward Northbrook Avenue to help an elderly neighbor. Neighbor said Margaret never arrived. I kept going back. The names changed, but the details stayed the same. Car trouble on Cedar Street. Calls for help from the woods. People walking toward Northbrook Avenue and never coming back. 37 cases in 40 years, all following the exact same patterns I'd seen with Elena. On the second day, Mrs. Patterson brought me coffee without me asking. Set it down next to the microfilm machine and lingered. Find what you're looking for? Maybe. Hard to say. She pulled up a chair. Your mother's Elena Thompson, right? Works at the hospital? Yeah. She had car trouble a few nights ago. I looked up from the machine. How'd you know that? Bill mentioned it. Said you left work in a hurry. She paused. She doing okay? I thought about Elena sitting on the couch, hands folded in her lap. The way she'd thanked me for catching her elbow. Her voice, definitely her voice, but something underneath it I couldn't name. I think so. Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, my husband lost his brother 20 years ago, Tommy Patterson. Maybe you saw his name in there. I had. Thomas Patterson, age 24, disappeared after hearing someone calling for help from the woods behind his apartment. Tommy was smart, she continued. Careful. Not the kind to wander off into the woods at night. But something called to him and he went. She touched the coffee cup with one finger. Bill found his car the next morning. Keys in the ignition, door open like he'd just stepped out for a minute. I'm sorry. Bill blamed himself for years. Said he should have known better, should have warned Tommy about the rules. She looked at me directly. You know about the rules, don't you? Some of them. She nodded. Some families kept better records than others. Wrote things down, passed them along. The Hendersons were good about that. Kept a journal for 3 generations. My chest tightened. Mrs. Henderson on Northbrook Avenue? That's right, Ruth Henderson, last of her family. She disappeared 5 years ago, but the journal's still here. She donated it to the library before. Mrs. Patterson trailed off. Before whatever happened to her happened. She left and came back 10 minutes later with a leather-bound notebook, brown and worn around the edges, the kind you'd buy at a drugstore, nothing fancy. Ruth said if anything happened to her, this should go to someone who needed it. She set it down next to my coffee. Looks like you might need it. I opened the journal. The handwriting was careful, precise. Ruth Henderson had written in blue ink, the same kind Elena used for her grocery lists. The first entry was dated 15 years ago, March 12th. Saw the fog on Northbrook Avenue again last night, thicker than usual, moving against the wind. Mother always said the fog was hunting, looking for someone specific. Stayed inside until it passed. I flipped through pages, dozens of entries, all documenting encounters with things that shouldn't exist. The voice in the woods, the breathing thing that walked the streets at night, the fog, and others. Things I'd never heard of. A woman in white who appeared in car headlights on rainy nights. Something that knocked on doors at exactly 3 in the morning. Always 3 knocks, never more or less. But it was the fog entries that made my hands shake. June 8th. The fog took Mrs. Kowalski last week, but today I saw her at the grocery store, buying the same things she always bought. She looked right, sounded right. Even knew about her cat's surgery. But her eyes were wrong. Too still. Like looking at a photograph of eyes instead of real ones. June 15th. Mrs. Kowalski's daughter called, said her mother's been acting strange since she came back from her walk. Doesn't remember family stories she used to tell. Forgot her grandson's middle name. Small things, but enough. June 22nd. Mrs. Kowalski's daughter found her mother standing in the backyard at 4 a.m, staring at nothing. When she asked what was wrong, Mrs. Kowalski said she was waiting for instructions. Daughter thinks it's dementia. I know better. I kept reading. Ruth Henderson had documented everything. The fog didn't just take people. It studied them, learned them. Then it sent back copies that were almost perfect. Almost. The copies are good, Ruth had written, but they're not alive. They're like recordings of people playing back what they observed. They know facts, memories, habits, but they don't know feelings. They can't improvise. They follow patterns. The real person fights back, struggles, shows fear. The copy just complies, does what it thinks it should do. I thought about Elena thanking me for catching her elbow, the way she'd sat so still while the thing circled our house, how she hadn't asked questions about where I'd been going. The final entry was dated 5 years ago, October 30th. I saw myself today, walking down Main Street like she belonged there. She was wearing my blue coat, the one with the missing button. Even had my purse, the leather one David gave me for our anniversary. She looked exactly like me. Every detail perfect. I followed her for 6 blocks. She walked to my house, used my key, went inside like she lived there. I'm writing this from the library. I don't know what to do. I can't go home. She's there, in my house, being me. If anyone sees us together, they'll think I'm the copy. The fog is getting thicker. I can see it from the library windows, rolling down Northbrook Avenue. It's coming for me. It knows I know. If someone finds this journal, remember, the copies can't feel fear. They don't understand danger. Real people run. Real people hide. Real people fight back. The copies just stand there and let it happen. That was the last entry. Ruth Henderson had vanished 3 days later. I closed the journal and sat back in the squeaky chair. Mrs. Patterson was watching me from the doorway. "Bad news?" she asked. I thought about Elena sitting on our couch, how calm she'd been when the thing was breathing outside our door, how she hadn't tried to look out the windows or asked why we needed to stay quiet. A real person would have been terrified. A real person would have demanded answers. Elena had just sat there and waited. "Yeah," I said, "bad news." I started small. Testing. "Remember that time you burned the pancakes so bad the smoke alarm went off for 10 minutes? I asked over breakfast the next morning. Elena looked up from her coffee. "Course I do. You opened every window in the house and stood on a chair waving a dish towel at the ceiling." That was right. Every detail. "What about when we went to see that movie last month? The one with the car chases?" "Fast Lane," she said without hesitation. "You fell asleep 20 minutes in and I had to wake you up when the credits rolled." Also right. But something felt off about how she said it. Too smooth, like reading from a script. I tried a different approach. "Want some coffee?" "Sure." I poured her a cup. Black, same as always. She took a sip and made a face. "Could you add some cream?" I stopped pouring my own cup. Elena had been drinking black coffee for as long as I'd known her. Said cream was for people who didn't actually like coffee. "Since when do you take cream?" "I don't know, just feels right today." She stirred in the cream and took another sip, smiled like it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. That afternoon, she was humming while she folded laundry, some pop song I'd heard on the radio. Elena hated pop music, said it gave her headaches. "What's that song?" "Just something stuck in my head." "Since when do you listen to that stuff?" She shrugged. "People change, Marcus. Tastes change." But Elena didn't change. Not like that. She'd been the same person for 28 years. Same coffee, same music, same way of folding shirts with the sleeves tucked just so. I watched her fold one of my work shirts. She laid it flat, folded the sides in, then rolled it from the bottom up. Elena had always folded from the top down, always. You're doing that different. Doing what different? The shirts. You always fold from the top. She looked down at the shirt in her hands, blinked twice. This way takes up less space in the drawer. Maybe it did, but Elena had never cared about drawer space before. I found a grocery list on the kitchen counter that evening. Elena's handwriting, but the letters were too neat, too uniform. Elena's real handwriting slanted to the right, and her R's always looked like they were falling over. These R's stood straight up. The next morning, I called the hospital. Elena Thompson, please. I'm sorry, but Elena hasn't been in since Monday. She called in sick Tuesday morning and hasn't been back since. Monday, the day her car broke down. Did she say when she'd be back? She didn't give a timeline, just said she wasn't feeling well and would call when she was ready to return. I hung up. Elena was sitting at the kitchen table reading a magazine. How are you feeling? Fine. Why? Hospital says you called in sick Tuesday. I did. I wasn't feeling well after everything that happened. But you seem fine now. I am fine now. She turned a page. Didn't look up. Maybe you should call them. Let them know you're better. I will when I'm ready. Elena had never missed work unless she was dying. Never. She'd gone in with 102 fever last winter because they were short-staffed. That evening, I sat across from her at dinner. Elena. Look at me. She looked up. Same brown eyes, same face, but something behind the eyes was different. Like looking at a photograph instead of a person. Why haven't you asked me about the other night? What about it? The thing outside, the breathing, the voices. What about it? A normal person would want to know what that was, would be scared, would ask questions. Her expression didn't change. I figure you'll tell me when you're ready. That's not like you. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think. Her voice was flat, matter of fact, like she was reading from a phone book. Elena, what happened to you in that fog? Nothing happened to me in the fog. Then why can't you remember anything? I told you. My memory is fuzzy. Fuzzy or gone? What's the difference? The real Elena would have been frustrated by now. Would have raised her voice or thrown her napkin down or demanded to know why I was interrogating her. This Elena just sat there, waiting. Why are you being so paranoid, Marcus? The words came out wrong, too careful. Like she'd practiced them. Paranoid? You've been watching me for days, testing me, asking strange questions. Her eyes were cold now, unfamiliar. I'm not paranoid. I'm careful. About what? About things that pretend to be people they're not. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she smiled, but it wasn't Elena's smile. It was too wide and didn't reach her eyes. That's a strange thing to say about your own mother. I went to bed early that night, told Elena I was tired. She said goodnight and went to her room like always, but I didn't sleep. I lay in my bed with the door cracked open just enough to see down the hallway, watched her door, listened. The house was quiet for hours. Normal settling sounds, wind outside, nothing else. Then at midnight exactly, I heard her door open. I kept my eyes barely open. Just slits. Enough to see but look asleep if she checked on me. Elena walked down the hallway in her nightgown, bare feet on the hardwood. She moved to the front door and stopped. The deadbolt was locked. The chain was on. I'd checked them myself before bed. Elena reached for the door handle and turned it. The door opened. No click of the deadbolt, no rattle of the chain. The door just opened like nothing was stopping it. She stepped outside and the door closed behind her. I waited 30 seconds, then got up and went to the door. Tried the handle. Locked. Deadbolt engaged. Chain in place. I looked out the front window. Elena was walking down the sidewalk toward downtown. Not hurrying. Just walking like she was going to the store. I threw on clothes and followed. Stayed back far enough that she wouldn't see me. Used parked cars and trees for cover. Elena walked straight down Main Street toward the town square. The square was empty during the day. Just a little park with benches and a gazebo where they held summer concerts. But tonight there were people, maybe a dozen of them, standing in a loose circle around the gazebo, all dressed like they were going to work or church or just running errands. I recognized some of them. Mrs. Chen, the woman who'd disappeared 3 years ago. She was wearing the same blue dress she'd had on in the missing person photo. Tommy Patterson, Mrs. Patterson's brother-in-law, still looked exactly like he had 20 years ago when he vanished. Patricia Henley, the woman whose driver's license I'd found in the clearing. Others I didn't know by name but remembered from old newspaper photos. People who'd gone missing over the years. People who were supposed to be dead. Elena walked up to the group like she belonged there, like this was a regular meeting she attended. They were talking, but I was too far away to hear the words clearly. Just voices, normal conversation voices, like neighbors discussing the weather, but the voices were wrong. Mrs. Chen was speaking in a man's voice, deep and gravelly. Tommy Patterson sounded like a young woman. Patricia Henley had the voice of a child. They were using voices that belonged to other people, voices they'd stolen. Elena said something and they all turned to look at her. When she spoke, I heard my own voice coming out of her mouth, my exact voice saying words I couldn't make out. They talked for maybe 20 minutes. Sometimes one of them would point toward different parts of town. Sometimes they'd nod like they were agreeing on something. Then they started to leave, not all at once. One by one they walked away in different directions, back to wherever they came from. Elena was one of the last to go. She walked back the way she'd come. Same casual pace. I followed her home, staying hidden. Watched her approach our front door. She reached for the handle and walked through the door without opening it, just stepped forward and passed through the wood like it wasn't there. I waited 5 minutes, then went back inside. Used my key on the locked door. Elena was in her bed, covers pulled up to her chin, eyes closed, breathing slow and steady like she'd been asleep for hours. But her feet were dirty. I sat in my truck outside the house for another hour, watching the dirty footprints she'd left on the front porch. The whole thing was bigger than just Elena. Had to be. The journal. I'd left it in the glove compartment. Ruth Henderson's handwriting looked even shakier under the dome light. I flipped past the entries about Mrs. Kowalski and the copies until I found what I was looking for. Page 43. The fog doesn't just take people randomly, it's systematic, methodical, like it's replacing the whole town one person at a time, building something. I've counted at least 20 families where someone came back different. The Pattersons, the Chens, the Kowalskis, all of them acting just close enough to normal that nobody asks questions. 20 families. That was just what Ruth had noticed 5 years ago. I kept reading. Found the source today. Old mining maps at the library show a cavern system beneath the town. Natural limestone caves that connect to the river. The fog comes up through the ground itself. Tommy Patterson told me about it before he disappeared. Said his grandfather used to warn kids away from the cave entrance behind Miller's farm. Said the mountain breathed at night. Miller's farm. I knew that place. Abandoned property about 3 miles north of town, where the river curved back toward the mountains. If the fog is keeping people somewhere, it would be down there, in the caves, close to its source. The next entry was her last one, the one about seeing her own copy. I closed the journal and started the truck. The fake Elena would be gone for at least 2 hours if the pattern held, same as the other night. Plenty of time to drive out to Miller's farm and back. or plenty of time to get myself killed. But if Ruth was right, if the real Elena was down there somewhere, I had to try. The thing wearing her face was getting better at pretending. Soon I wouldn't be able to tell the difference at all. The drive to Miller's farm took 25 minutes on back roads I hadn't used since high school. The farmhouse had been empty for 15 years, windows boarded up and roof sagging, but I wasn't here for the house. I parked behind the old barn and grabbed my gear from the truck bed: rope, flashlight, emergency flares I'd picked up from the hardware store. Probably not enough, but it was what I had. The cave entrance was exactly where Ruth said it would be. A crack in the limestone about 4 feet wide, hidden behind a stand of pine trees. You'd never find it unless you knew where to look. White mist drifted up from the opening like breath on a cold morning. I tied one end of the rope to the biggest pine tree and dropped the other end into the cave. The flashlight beam disappeared into the mist after about 10 feet. This was stupid. I knew it was stupid. I went down anyway. The limestone was slick under my boots. The rope burned against my palms as I lowered myself into the crack, following the beam of my flashlight deeper into the mountain. The fog got thicker with every step, not the normal kind that drifts and moves with air currents. This stuff pressed against me like something alive, like it was tasting me. 20 feet down, the crack opened into a proper cave. 30 feet down, I could barely see my own hands. 40 feet down, I heard breathing that wasn't mine. I stopped on a narrow ledge and listened. Slow, steady breathing coming from somewhere ahead in the darkness. Dozens of people breathing in perfect rhythm. The rope went slack in my hands. I'd reached the end. I tied the flashlight to my belt and felt along the cave wall, following the sound of breathing deeper into the passages. The fog was so thick now it felt like swimming through cotton. My fingers found something that wasn't rock. Something soft, organic, like a cocoon made of spider silk, but bigger, much bigger. I clicked the flashlight back on and nearly dropped it. The cocoon was 8 feet tall and shaped like a person. White webbing covered it completely, but I could see the outline of someone inside, someone breathing. There were dozens of them. The cave opened into a massive chamber filled with cocoons hanging from the ceiling and standing against the walls, all of them breathing, all of them containing people. I moved from one to the next, shining the flashlight through the webbing, looking for Elena's face. Mrs. Chen, Tommy Patterson, Patricia Henley. People I recognized from the missing person reports and others I didn't. All of them alive, all of them unconscious. I found Elena near the back of the chamber. Her eyes were closed, but her chest rose and fell steadily. The webbing covered her like a second skin, but I could see her face clearly. The real Elena. The one who would have been terrified by what happened the other night. The one who would have asked 100 questions. I pulled out my pocket knife and started cutting through the webbing around her head. The stuff was tougher than it looked, like cutting through wet leather. But it gave way eventually, and Elena's face was free. She didn't wake up. I kept cutting, working my way down to her shoulders, her arms. The webbing peeled away in long strips that dissolved into mist as soon as they hit the cave floor. That's when the fog started moving. Not drifting, moving, with purpose. It swirled around me in tight spirals, getting denser and colder. The breathing sounds stopped, all of them. The entire chamber went silent except for the sound of my knife cutting through Elena's cocoon. The fog pulled back toward the center of the chamber and started taking shape. It was huge, 15 feet tall and made entirely of white mist, but solid somehow, real. It had arms like tree branches and a face that kept shifting between different people. Mrs. Chen's eyes, Tommy Patterson's mouth, Patricia Henley's nose, Elena's voice when it spoke. You shouldn't have come here. I kept cutting. Elena's arms were free now. I grabbed her shoulders and shook her. Elena, wake up. We need to go. The creature moved closer. Each step sent vibrations through the cave floor. She belongs to me now. They all do. I've been feeding on this town for 200 years, building my collection. You can't take her." Elena's eyes fluttered open, confused, scared, but definitely her. "Marcus?" Her voice was weak, but it was really her voice, not the flat, emotionless copy I'd been living with. "Can you stand?" She tried to sit up, but the webbing around her legs held her in place. I went back to cutting while the creature watched. "She won't remember you," it said. "None of them remember anything after a few days. It's easier that way. Less struggling." Elena looked around the chamber and saw the other cocoons. Her face went white. "What is this place?" "I'll explain later. Right now we need to move." The webbing around her legs finally gave way. Elena stumbled when she tried to stand, but I caught her arm. The creature raised one massive arm, and tendrils of fog shot toward us like whips. I pulled Elena behind a rock formation as the tendrils smashed into the cave wall where we'd been standing. "The entrance," I said. "We need to get back to the rope." More tendrils lashed out, wrapping around my ankle and yanking me off my feet. Elena grabbed my hand as the creature tried to drag me toward an empty cocoon hanging near the chamber wall. I pulled one of the emergency flares from my belt and struck it against the rock. Red light filled the chamber, and the creature recoiled with a sound like steam escaping from a kettle. "It doesn't like fire," Elena said. I lit 2 more flares and handed one to Elena. The creature backed away from the light, but it didn't retreat far. "The whole chamber," I said. "If we can bring down the ceiling, we can trap it." Elena nodded and ran toward the far wall, touching her flare to the webbing that covered the rock. The stuff burned fast, sending up thick black smoke. I did the same on the other side. The creature roared and sent more tendrils after us, but the flares kept it at bay. The ceiling started to crack. Small rocks fell into the chamber, bouncing off the cocoons. "There's another way out," Elena said, pointing toward a narrow passage I hadn't noticed before. I can hear water. The river. We ran for the passage as the ceiling began to collapse behind us. The creature's roar turned into something desperate, angry. Chunks of limestone crashed down into the chamber, crushing the empty cocoons. The passage was barely wide enough for one person. We crawled through it on our hands and knees, following the sound of running water, while the mountain shook around us. Light appeared ahead. Real light. Dawn breaking over the river. We tumbled out of the cave onto the rocky riverbank just as the passage collapsed behind us, sealing the creature underground. Elena sat on the rocks, breathing hard, staring at the sealed cave entrance. How long was I in there? 3 days. She looked at me with the real Elena's eyes, worried, questioning, alive. What happened to the thing that was pretending to be me? I sat on those rocks for a long time, watching the sun come up over the river. Elena didn't say much, just breathed. Real breathing, not that steady rhythm the copy had used. "We should go home," she said finally. I helped her stand. Her legs were shaky from 3 days in that webbing, but she was solid, real. When she stumbled on the loose rocks, I caught her arm and felt the warmth there. We walked back to where I'd left the truck behind Miller's barn. Elena moved slow, but she moved like herself. The way she favored her left ankle on uneven ground, the way she pushed her hair back when it fell in her face. The drive into town took 20 minutes. Neither of us talked much. What was there to say? But as we came down Main Street, I saw something that made me pull over. The fog on Northbrook Avenue was gone. Not just thin or patchy. Gone. For the first time since I was a kid, I could see all the way down that street to where it curved past Henderson's old house. "Marcus," Elena said. She was looking out the passenger window. "Look." There were clothes scattered on the sidewalk. A blue dress crumpled near the fire hydrant. A man's jacket spread flat against the pavement like someone had just stepped out of it. Work boots sitting empty by the bus stop. I drove closer. More clothes. A hospital uniform draped over a bench. Children's sneakers lined up neat on someone's front steps. Elena touched my arm. The copies? Must be. We drove through downtown. Same thing everywhere. Empty clothes lying in doorways, on park benches, in the middle of the street. Like people had just vanished right out of them. But then I saw Bill walking out of Patterson's auto, keys in his hand, looking around confused. I pulled into the lot and got out. Marcus? Bill squinted at me like he was trying to remember something. What day is it? Thursday. Thursday. He said it slow. I was working late Monday, finishing the Henderson transmission. Then, he shook his head. Nothing. I can't remember anything after Monday night. Elena was out of the truck now, standing beside me. How long have you been at the shop, Bill? Every day, I think. But it's like watching someone else do it. Like I was asleep but still walking around. 3 months. That's when the real Bill had been taken. 3 months of the copy running his shop, and none of us had noticed the difference. We found Mrs. Chen wandering downtown in her nightgown, asking where her husband was. Found Tommy Patterson sitting on a bench outside the library, looking exactly like he had 20 years ago when he disappeared. He kept asking for his wife, who'd remarried and moved to Portland 15 years back. By noon, we'd counted 18 people, all confused, all missing chunks of time, all wondering where they'd been. The woods were quiet now. I drove past the spot where I'd heard Elena's voice calling from the trees, and there was nothing, just pine needles and shadows, normal shadows that didn't move wrong. Elena and I went to check the river. The water ran clear and steady, no strange currents pulling toward the bank, no voices underneath the sound of water over rocks. It's over, Elena said. I nodded, but I kept listening anyway. Old habits. That night I waited for the footsteps, for the wet breathing, for something to walk past our house calling our names. Nothing came. Elena made dinner, real dinner, the way she'd always made it. She burned the edges of the grilled cheese and complained about the pan being too hot. She drank her coffee black and made faces when I added cream to mine. You're different, she said while we ate. How? You keep looking at the windows, but not scared, like you're surprised they're just windows. She was right. For 28 years, I'd checked every lock twice, listened for sounds that didn't belong, stayed inside after dark unless I had no choice. Now the windows were just glass, the locks were just metal, the dark outside was just the absence of light. The rules, I said. What rules? Never go out after 6. Stay away from the woods. Don't trust voices calling from places voices shouldn't be. I looked at her. We don't need them anymore. Elena reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were warm and real and exactly the right temperature. So, what do we do now? I thought about Ruth Henderson's journal, sitting in my truck's glove compartment. All those years of careful notes about something that was finally gone. All those families who'd lost people and never knew why. We live, I said, like normal people. Elena smiled, the real smile, with the crooked tooth and the way her eyes crinkled at the corners. I don't remember how to do that. Me neither, but we'll figure it out. The next morning, I walked outside at 5:30 to get the paper, just because I could. The street was empty and quiet, but it was the right kind of quiet. No fog creeping between houses. No shapes moving wrong in my peripheral vision. For the first time in 28 years, Millbrook felt like a normal town. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have to be afraid of what lived in the dark.